The Council House fight. Conflict is messy. Ending conflict can be tricky even in the best of circumstances. When you don't trust someone in the first place, it's difficult to know when you're being played or when you need to just try to understand the other side a little better. This is why peace talks can feel anything but peaceful. Listen to the next story so you can decide what you think about the situation. Who is in the right? Now, as you recall, one of the challenges the new republic faced was Native Americans. And one of those groups, the Paniteca, they were a group of Comanche and they were ready to talk peace. They had been plagued by a smallpox epidemic. They also were constantly being raided by other Native American groups and attacked by the Texas Rangers. So they were ready to talk peace. If you look at the image on the right, that is a mural, one of the post office murals here in San Antonio. And you see a little girl there on the Anglo American side, and she represents a girl called Matilda Lockhart. So Matilda Lockhart had been one of the hostages. She had been taken by the Comanche and held hostage. And when the Anglo Americans were able to get her back, she told them she had been basically horribly mistreated, and that there were other Anglo American um, hostages being held as well. So that kind of set the tone for the negotiations. So they agreed that they would meet in San Antonio at the council house to talk peace. But the Texans had it in their head that they would use this to get all of the Anglo hostages back. So one of their terms was going to be full release of all hostages. And they had decided that if that did not happen, then they would take the Comanche that came to talk peace hostage. As you can probably guess, it did not go over so well. One of the things that they did not know, or that they didn't seem to understand, was that the Comanche were not just this uniform, homogenous group, that this particular group of Comanche, the Panateca, could only really talk for and make a peace treaty for their group of Comanche. They could not sign the peace treaty for everybody. And if they agreed to hand over hostages, it would only be the hostages that they had. It wouldn't be all of the hostages anyway. So when they arrived, they didn't have the hostages, of course. And when their chief was asked to return them, he basically said, I can't do that. I can't speak for the other groups, but if you ask them, I bet if you give them supplies that they would, in fact, release the hostages. At that point, the Texans, who had already decided what they were going to do, they said, "No, we're going to take you hostage. Sorry." And as soon as the Comanche understood that and perceived what was going on, they started to fight, and they called for help from the Comanche that were waiting outside, that they had kind of brought as like backup, and it just kind of became a melee and a firestorm of, just fighting and shooting. And in the end, both Texans and Comanche would end up losing their lives. But the even beyond that, after this was over, these Comanche who had basically come to the Texans to talk peace were no longer interested in peace, and just began raiding and looting and killing, and it only upped the violence. It did not help the situation. So again, when we learn these events, we are thinking in terms of how is this going to lead to annexation? How does this back up the support for the cause of annexation? So this increase in violence, this event, what did it do exactly? All right, we'll see you on the next slide. Here is your long story short version that you can use to answer the questions below.